Thanks, Clive. Good afternoon, everybody. There's a few faces here I recognise, a few I don't. We're going to be going at quite a pace for the next 15 minutes. I'm going to try and rattle through this and leave a bit of time for questions. There's a couple of exercises here where I know a couple of people I'm looking at have been through the exercise before, because they're students on the programme, the master's programme. So if I could ask you to kind of go along with some of this if you've seen it before. A lot of people today have spoken about the concept of an environment, and I guess that's what I'm going to try and bring into focus. In the next 15 minutes, I'm going to bring this whole concept of climate into focus for us. My ambition is that you might kind of add thinking about climate onto your agenda, finding out a bit more. Best case is you start to think about the climate that you create around you. Okay? Now, just before we do that, though, I want to lay out, from our point of view, just a couple of foundations, because I'm going to use some language throughout this, and it would make sense for me, and I look forward for me to refer back to it, so you're clear about what I mean by the concept of creativity and innovation. I'm not suggesting all of you share the same one, and this is not necessarily the view of the business school or the university, but this is what we use. It's my preferred definition of creativity and innovation. It's newness that's useful, at least to the creator. Okay? So that's what we mean by it. When we look at the concept of newness, we can plot newness on a continuum from, if you like, what we call at one end developmental or adaptive type innovation and creativity, incremental improvement, maybe what you can refer to. The word baked has been dropped from the tin here of baked beans. At the other end of the scale, you've got step change, radical, gut-busting breakthrough, first microwave. All right, so we call that exploratory type innovation. Right, so newness can be anywhere along that continuum. Okay, and you can measure this, by the way. There's various instruments where you can measure where your preference is on this continuum. It will be useful later on for us to refer back to. The other thing I just want to share is that this is probably, in our view, the most widely used model for understanding and applying and developing creativity innovation. It's called the 4 Ps, first developed back in 1964, University of Arizona by Dr. Mel Rhodes. We're going to be focusing today, and what I'm going to be trying to do is bring this P here, the P of press, into focus. It's a social sciences term, and it's something to do with, am I too close to you now? What about now?
Oh,
Yeah, getting
it's
inside.
excellent, yeah.
So in social science, around most of us, there's about 18 inches is kind of okay. But when I move inside that space, I didn't touch it, did I? All right, we feel it, all right, and it's the same word, the same root as the word pressure. We feel something pressing on us, okay? The other P's are people, product, and process, okay? And clearly you've heard a lot of this over the last few hours. So we're focusing on press. Who's thought about climate? Atmosphere. In your organisation, in your team, who's thought about it around themselves, thought about what's the climate like that you create around you and the impact that that has on others. Anybody here? Anybody measured it around them? No. That's done where we're seeing a lot of the current work. We're seeing a lot of the current research. Traditionally, we get people think, climate, atmosphere, this is like trying to nail jelly to the wall. How can you kind of measure climate, atmosphere? And frankly, it's not as important as the technical stuff, the hard stuff. Typically what a lot of engineers might say, a lot of folks think about. Well, thanks to quite a lot of research that's gone on back in the 80s, initially a lot of it in Northern Europe, the concept of climate has been brought much more to the fore and much more that we can understand. If you like, the way to think about climate is it's an intervening variable. Now you're working in organisations, and up the top there are the resources, and indeed you are, to some degree, a resource in the organisation. and you're down the bottom, you're trying to produce some kind of output, and climate sits there as an intervening variable. It's moderating how effective those resources are, how effective you are. For those of you that can remember your Hertzberg, basic kind of management stuff, you can think about physical environment or the environment in two ways. The physical side, so it's the physical stuff that we can see around us here. And those are very much, if you remember your Hertzberg stuff, they're very much hygiene factors. It kind of has to be good enough, but they don't motivate, they don't fire you. Psychological environment or climate does make a difference, makes a big difference. It's a bit like certain factors with Hertzberg. There are certain things that you have to just have enough of, and there are certain things in the psychological environment that will make a big difference. Climate is also, or the environment comes under many, many terms. Here's a whole raft of terms that you will be aware of. We're particularly going to go and distinguish in a moment the difference between climate from culture. They are connected, but we're going to pull them apart. There are many words that make up this field. And this is what we mean by climate, as distinct from culture. Normally, when you think about this field, the field is normally people kind of refer to is they think about culture. It kind of is often a catch-all bucket for things where if it's not something to do with process or technology or people, it's kind of the other category, culture. But here we're very deliberately separating climate from culture. Climate can be, if you like, regarded as something you experience, and it's observable. In the metaphor here, you can see it's the root, the part of the plant above the ground. Whereas culture is more something that's valued. You don't experience it, it's something that's valued in the organisation. It reflects the deeper foundations. So that's the difference. They are clearly connected. If any of you are interested in making changes in the organisation, has anyone ever tried to dig out the roots of a tree or a shrub? Yeah. What's it like? It's tough, huh? There is some views around that if you're kind of going after a culture change programme, there's some organisations that mandate that the CEO stay with the organisation for the next 9 years in order to make the culture change. But let's just, these observable habits that characterise life in an organisation, they're going on all the time. You are both part of them and also creating them. And I'm just going to pop up, it's just going to put a sentence out. Can you, as soon as you see it, please don't think too much, all right? Just shout out what you see on the screen. Okay, ready? What do you see? Opportunity is nowhere. Opportunity is nowhere. Would you accept that it also does say opportunity is now here? You would? No. So there's just a little pattern. It's the way that as soon as you saw the pattern, your brain shuts down. And now we'll do another one here. It's a bit trickier, but you do not need a calculator. This one involves numbers. And again, I'm just going to set a little pattern up and show you here. There's a pattern set up. All right, and it's just a pattern of behaviour. Now, the goal here is going to be a series of numbers that are on the screen. And together, all of you are going to shout out the total. It's just a little series of sums. Okay? You do not need a calculator. On the basis that you made it here today, you should be able to do these sums. All right? So, ready? So, all together, shout the number.
1,000. 2040. 2040. 2070. 3070. 3090. 4090. 5,000.
Worrying, really. Within 15 seconds, I set you up in a heuristic or a pattern. It's a recurring pattern of behaviour, okay? Now, these things are just going on all the time, all right, in your organisation. You're transmitting them, people are picking up your vibes or whatever, particularly if you're in the leadership role, Right? It's quite scary when you kind of sit there for a minute and you're all kind of thinking you're wise and rational and I can drive a car and I got here and okay. And did anyone get it right? Okay. So it's quite scary. So what I'm going to do, so that's just very broadly setting up this field of climate.
You're not going to explain that?
What?
Why answer to that? Am I still being big?
It's just a pattern of behaviour, and your brain shuts down on certain thinking too much. I kind of got the hang of this. I go wander off now.
No, I think it's just saying you can't add up.
Oh, okay. Well, that's the other reason. So there's broad climate. I want to look at now. What can you do about it? So what? Okay. You know, is that is it useful? Well, there are some things you can do. There's a couple of measures that are around. Keys is one, situational outlook questionnaire is another. I'm going to talk a bit more about the situational outlook questionnaire because we think it's the best one out there. It's Burroughs listed and kind of gets the top ranking on Burroughs. Burroughs is the assessment outfit in the USA. You can develop leadership practices that kind of work on developing climate. You can, of course, come on something like the Michael. And there are some students here who can tell you whether it helps or not. There's James and Zabby and Catherine. Who else is in? So there's 3 in the room. 4. Oh, somebody back there. Alison. Hi. So this is the SOQ. So keys is similar, by the way. There's more similarities than differences between keys and SOQ. Here are the 9 dimensions that make up about 20 years of work in Sweden. I'm not going to go through these. All these materials are going to be up on the website and everything else afterwards. But there are 9 dimensions. I want to just draw your attention on a couple of kind of, I guess, the more interesting ones. There was a talk in the previous speaker about trust and openness. I think that was kind of coming up. Certainly, that is one of the most difficult to deal with, but also the most important. And you'll see it's there, trust and openness. What's getting interesting for us is to start trying to work out which of these dimensions are more valuable or more important depending on certain contexts. That's kind of where a lot of our current research is. But those are the 9 dimensions. The great thing is the Swedes, Ekvall and Arvonen, that developed this back in the 80s, have now done some development work for us and got some normative data. You'll notice down the left-hand side, for innovative companies, that on all dimensions, the climate is higher, with one exception on conflict. Conflict is to do with interpersonal conflict, as opposed to debate, which you'll see on here, 1 second from bottom, is to do with task conflict, if you like. You'll see here, this is some normative data for innovative, average and stagnant companies. Of the stagnant companies, by the way, 4 have gone out of business and the others supported by the Swedish government. How do people use this sort of thing? Well, they use it in organisation-wide improvement efforts, developing leadership, improving collaboration and teams. Is that 5 minutes to the end? Yeah. Typical things, you know, whatever instrument, this is a typical kind of organisational type application. All right, you can kind of get some sense of how your organisation's going. This is the kind of more exciting focus where we're doing a lot more work at the moment. This is here, you do your own score around you, you get your observers, and in this context, there's a number of different folks in the group, multiple managers, and they're starting to measure the climate around them in order to start thinking about how they're going to develop their leadership behaviours. It's kind of much more interesting, productive line of inquiry that we're working on. So, let me just, Clive just told me that we're about 5 minutes from the end, so I want to leave some time for questions. Can you do anything about it? Well, the good news, folks, the reason we talk about it as climate is situational, which you probably know. It's a metaphor borrowed from the world of weather. The good news is that 65% of the perception of climate is affected by leadership behaviours. So if you want to, you can do something about it. if you have the motive. It's not really so much a cost issue. It is a big issue to do with whether you've got the time, energy, motivation to change, personally change, grow and develop. It's the biggest challenge. I'm going to just pause it there and throw it out to see if there's any questions. Clive, do you want me to just take them? You don't want to chair?
I will do
This question.
before we get down to the wire.
We are, okay. Who's first? I didn't see whose hand went up first. Did anyone else? Ladies first?
I've been thinking about this a lot and trying to apply it a bit. How far do you think your dimensions relate just to a creative climate and not just to a productive, effective, quality climate? Why is it just? Why do you say creative?
It's a great question. When Euron was first looking at this, the original research was the very original research was in Volvo, and it was linked to the process of the idea suggestion scheme. Anyway, he was measuring and then went on to measure. He measured originally innovative climate, the innovation climate, and measured innovation productivity. He has subsequently gone back and re-looked at data, and there's a study in a university, interestingly, where they found actually the link to general productivity is even higher. So you're right. This really is about a healthy climate. Full stop. Absolutely.
That's right.
No, absolutely. I agree. We agree. The original work, though, was on creativity and innovation. Oh, sorry, Alison. Oh, sorry. I'll come to you.
I've done quite a lot of work in Sweden on innovation.
Yeah.
And there's something in the culture of Sweden that often doesn't like to demonstrate conflict. So I was just wondering, in terms of, you mentioned conflict being one of the 9 dimensions, to what extent conflict might be there, but it just might not be visible?
Yeah, it is, as it shows on the well, it is one of the dimensions, and where conflict is described here, this is not conflict over the task. I'm thinking about the actual different ways we might do something or reactions to something. It's you're right. I don't like your idea. In fact, every idea you come up with is rubbish, and you suddenly stick a knife in by the coffee machine and talk about people behind their backs, and it becomes very personal. So you attack the person. Of course, the link in highly productive or very healthy climates is where people really do feel safe to speak up, because often they don't. Which is probably the trust dimension. Alistair, sorry.
Andy, as a pragmatist and confirmed corner cutter, because I usually have to, I get the really intriguing idea that could changing the climate actually be a viable alternative to trying to change the culture, because if it is, then it looks much easier to do.
Yeah.
Am I correct?
Yes, that's exactly what we say. They're linked. The roots of the tree are connected, of course. But if you want to do something that's more short-term, more observable, more effective, something you can frankly get your arms around.
Is it also easier to change climate locally?
Yeah,
culture
absolutely.
locally?
Yeah, absolutely. You can do something in your own team or division or department rather than have to take on the whole organisation. In an organisation, you normally have to, the culture is at an organisational level.
And we just had 4 hands go up simultaneously.
Okay.
You can't do it because
No, sure.
I fobbed you off last time.
Oh, did you get to do fobbing off?
I did fob
Because I
off.
paid
I'm
you.
structured fobbing off. We'll have to let the last question
Thank you.
go here. I apologise to the other 3.
How the roots of climate in culture?
Yes.
It's very hard to create a productive climate if that isn't one of your values and beliefs.
It is.
Yeah.
It's tough, absolutely.
We had, I worked in a mobile operator, and we had a chief executive who was saying all the right things and then doing things that undermined them, as in not consciously, and it was merely because actually he was trying to create a climate, but failing because actually it wasn't what he believed.
Yeah, deep down, yeah.
Yeah.
Skillful incompetence, we call that, yeah.
Yeah.
So, they often
He
say
was
one
an
thing, do something else.
amazingly, I mean,
Yeah.
very, very able person,
Sure.
but just
I believe it was.
tripped himself up.
Yeah. And it is, yeah, they can do it. And we can see it as well, can't we?
Yeah, so the idea of being able to create a climate as a shortcut to deep-rooted cultural change could be dangerous.
It can be, but it's difficult. I wouldn't say necessarily, maybe dangerous. All change and innovation is probably dangerous
Yeah.
to some degree. So,
Can I just check if Bruce and Nazir, our next speakers, are here? They
Yeah,
are.
they are.
So can we thank you very
Thank
much
you.
indeed, Andy?